Woodland Landowner Project Assistance. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items that need to be discussed. Today's workshop will be recorded, with the recording being placed on the DANR's YouTube channel for public viewing once we review and approved by the DANR technical support team. DANR is an equal opportunity provider and wants to encourage participation. However, if you do not like or want to be part of the live recording, an email when the recordings are uploaded onto our YouTube site will be sent to everyone who registered for this webinar. All microphones and videos have been turned on, and due to bandwidth concerns, we request that they stay off during the presentations. At each presentation, we will be taking questions. All your questions can be placed in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and be allowed to turn on your microphone. Our agenda today will cover the USDA Farm Service Agency, USDA Natural Resource Conservation, NRCS, and South Dakota Conservation District grants that are known, South Dakota Department of Safety Wildland Fire Programs, South Dakota DANR programs, and South Dakota Family Forest Association programs. With that, our first presentation is given by Owen Fagan with the USDA FSA office, and will be covering Emergency Forest Restoration Program. His presentation is recorded, but I will try to answer some questions, and any questions that come up that are not addressed, we will make sure and get to him. Sorry, hold on 1 second. It's not being the happiest with me.
All right, so just want to thank everybody for taking the time today. Patricia reached out and asked that I record this short presentation on the EFRP program, Emergency Forest Restoration Program. This will be a new program administered in South Dakota through the Farm Service Agency. And these handful of slides here will just be a high-level overview of the program itself. I should probably turn on. Does that look better, Patricia? Full screen at least?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So first off, what is EFRP? The EFRP is a cost share program that provides emergency funding and technical assistance to owners of non-industrial private forest land. It provides assistance to carry out emergency measures to restore forest health and forest resources on that NIPF damaged ground from the result of natural disasters. So there are added environmental benefits once the restoration is completed, helps reduce some erosion, improves some groundwater quality, can enhance the food and cover for wildlife, obviously restores the forest health, and then promotes some carbon sequestration. What is non-industrial private forest lands? These are rural commercial forest lands with existing tree cover, or which are suitable for growing trees and are owned by a private non-industrial forest landowner as defined in this section. And when they say this section, they're referencing the 7 CFR part 701.2. So further defines that the owners of the non-industrial private forest means for purposes of the EFRP, an individual group, association, corporation, Indian tribe, or other legal private entity owning non-industrial private forest land, or who receives concurrence from the landowner for making the claim in lieu of the owner for that practice implementation. If someone owns a lease on the land for a minimum of 10 years, they could qualify. And owners or leasees principally engaged in the primary processing of the raw wood products are excluded from the definition. So if the commercial use is agreed upon through the processing of those products, those would be ineligible. And then the owners of the land leased to the lessees who would be excluded under the previous sentence are also excluded. So we got to be cautious of those that are in a commercialized industry that aren't part of these benefits. So it's that non-industrial private forest. Types of damage, hurricane damage, we're going to see a lot of that obviously down in the southeast part of the nation. Ice storm damage, we can see that here in the Dakotas. Tornado and wildfire, similar disasters that we've experienced probably in years past. And flood damage. The land eligibility, all of the following must be true. It has to be physically located in the county affected by that natural disaster. Land must have had or has an existing tree cover before the disaster event. Damage that if not treated would impair or endanger natural resources or affect future use of that NIPF ground. And if there's also conservation structures within that land that were damaged, those are also eligible for restoration. The next two slides are just as a table format, talks about different structures or damaged areas and if the eligibility is applicable or not. Don't think I'll read that to you, but these slides are made available so the group can go back and review these as needed. But in the event of an application or a disaster identified in a given county, the evaluation between the Forest Service and FSA would determine what the restoration needs are based on what's on the landscape. It does go into this, the second part of the table talks about the applicants. And again, these are all listed what I previously had said and talks about the eligibility for those participants. Ineligible participants would be a federal agency, state, a political subdivision of a state agency, or a district with taxing authority. So this is going to be for the entity or the individual that owns that NIPF ground or leases it for has a 10-year lease on that. Cost share levels. Once we determine that there was a natural disaster that qualifies and we determine what the needs are to restore that acreage, that forest acreage, the cost share levels and maximum limitation is going to be at a 75% cost share level. And that is for all participants. Other programs that the FSA administers does have different thresholds for limited resource or beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged. But the EFRP program limits it all to 75% for all producers. So the financial assistance, as I said, is going to cover 75% of the eligible expenses, not to exceed the approved rates. It has to be at least a minimum of $1,000 incurred for cost of restoration. Each person or legal entity is limited to $500,000 per disaster. And we do allow up to 2 years to complete that restoration work. The following websites are also available for additional information on all FSA programs, but you can find fact sheets and things on the EFRP program at that website as well. And I guess that's the short high-level overview of the EFRP program, and I could be available for any questions. I'll leave my contact information with Patricia today, and she can let the audience know. Also, a great resource, and probably the first resource that should be utilized, is to reach out to your local farm service agency in your respective county, and they can help answer any questions. So again, thank you for your time, and look forward to working with you all.
I I do have a couple questions for the workshop.
Okay.
If you have a second. One is, when people are looking at this program, how soon after the natural disaster do they need to be contacting FSA?
I would say immediately, so that we can get the natural disaster on record if the county office is already not aware of it. Because the first qualification is to have that qualifying natural event. So we need to get that assessed and determined eligibility first. And then if we have the specific acreages that have been damaged by that natural event, you know, that's when we'd work with you folks through the Forest Service to get on the ground and assess what those needs are for that restoration work on the landscape.
And knowing the group that we're reaching out to, once it's been about 6 months after the natural disaster, it's not something that you guys really look at, correct?
Yes and no. I mean, we want to keep it, you know, it is an emergency program. So one would think if we're getting that extended period down the line that the emergency has passed. So, you know, the more timely that we can get out there and look at it, the better off we are. Understand that some limitations, whether it be weather conditions, time of the year, those types of things could limit our access to the acreage. And depending on the type of damage that's out there, there still may be that scar, so to speak, that can be evaluated and still, you know, assess that damage at that later date. But not, myself, I'm not as familiar with the forest acreage, but I would assume at 6 months down the road, that forest is going to have started to rehabilitate itself on its own. So that I think would have to be taken into account as well.
Then the other thing, for the benefit of the audience, the general understanding of FSA versus NRCS and how they're related and how they're a little bit different.
Okay. So I think the first thing to recognize is FSA and NRCS are both part of the USDA umbrella, but we are two separate agencies. Most times NRCS is the technical agency, and FSA is the administration agency. With that said, NRCS has expanded their programs to both technical and administration, but they are wholesale and in-house for those said programs. And some examples of those would be CSP, EQIP, and then they have some grant programs and things that they administer. Where the FSA and NRCS relationship starts and continues is through the CRP program. We are the keeper of the contract. FSA is the keeper of the contract, administers the payments. NRCS plans the technical application, you know, how many pounds of grass to put out there, when the seeding dates should be, what type of mid-contract management might apply to that landscape. They also assist us with the ECP, Emergency Conservation Program, which is similar to what we're talking about today with the EFRP. It restores lands due to floods. One of the most common uses of ECP is in drought years. We provide installation for emergency water systems, grazing livestock. NRCS is instrumental in helping us plan those pipelines and tanks and watering facilities. So that's where that relationship is NRCS is the technical agency, FSA is the administration agency.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'll make sure that during the recording we make sure we've got your information so that people can email you or we can reach out to the local agencies. So with that, I'm going to switch over to the next presentation. Our next presentation is going to be on the NRCS EQIP program, and with that, I'm going to share this PowerPoint, and Matt or Krista, which would like the control?
I can take over here, Patricia.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Matt Walsh, and some of you may know me, Southern Hills Service Forester, so I kind of cover the areas of Fall River, Custer, and then up and into Pennington County as well. But today we're going to kind of talk about the NRCS EQIP General Fund. So recently there have been some changes to the NRCS EQIP funding structure, where a certain portion of funding has gone and been allotted to various projects, which we'll talk about next. But the general fund still exists, and any landowners can apply for it. It's a flat rate reimbursement cost share for landowners that complete practices that NRCS designates. And this would be there's many practices, but kind of in the realm of forestry. We have pre-commercial thinning, brush management or meadow enhancement, fuel breaks, fire breaks, woody debris management, and just there's a pretty long slew of practices. You can do there is like seeding, reseeding. So like I said, there's a lot of practices, and kind of when you have us come out, we can kind of figure out a plan to see which of those practices apply to the property. But to apply for this one, you need to have a farm number and records with the FSA, which is a pretty simple process. Usually they share an office with your local NRCS office, so you can just go in and they'll help you fill that out. And then there's a NRCS application for EQIP. I have a few, we all kind of have copies, and then you can, again, going in and talking with NRCS after you've talked with us, you can fill that out. It's really not too lengthy. And then one other thing is that their reimbursements are direct deposits, so they like to make sure everybody knows that they do need your bank account and routing information, because they direct deposit right into that bank account. But that's it. They just need the basic information to make those deposits. So it's just something to be aware of. And then after after you get your farm number, after you fill out your NRCS application, you want to meet with one of us, me or Krista in the north. And then that's where we'll work with you to kind of figure out what are your goals for the land. We'll help you determine your project area. We'll help you determine your acreage. And then that's where we can kind of go through that list of practices and figure out, okay, this is what your goal is, and these are the practices that we can use to help get you that reimbursement to achieve that goal. The general fund is kind of a competitive funding. So that's in the general fund, everybody from the Hills area, so all the way from Fall River County up to Lawrence County, are all competing for that funding. You're ranked, and the ranking kind of happens based on a scoring system, and you get more points based on how many conservation practices you're doing and how many conservation problems those address. So, doing a pre-commercial thinning and doing a reseeding and doing a fuel break, all of that will add on more points because you're addressing more conservation problems. And we could go over that more in depth when we meet with you. But it's not a huge deal because we're just trying to get you the practices that make the most sense on your property. And then also having a forest stewardship plan will kind of rank you a little bit higher and get you a little bit more points. So that's a real big benefit to having a forest stewardship plan. If you don't have one already, is that it does get you more points and a little bit of a higher ranking. You do have to sign a 10-year contract with NRCS, but what that means is that you basically have 10 years to complete the work. So say you have 50 acres on your land that needs to be thinned, then you can break that up into doing 5 acres every year for 10 years, and then you can complete that work. Now, one kind of caveat with that is that one practice or one area needs to be completed pretty much every year, basically to show that you're having progress on the contract. So you do have to do some thinning every year. You can't kind of just thin or push it off until year 10 and then thin. And we like to recommend too that you kind of plan on getting it done within 5 years, because 10 years is a pretty long time. And as we've seen in recent times with inflation and the price of everything going up, you don't want to be locked in. When you sign this contract, you're locked in at that reimbursement rate, and then say, 2 or 3 years down the road, the new farm bill comes out, the reimbursement rate goes up. Well, you're still locked in at the lower reimbursement rate. So you want to try to get it done. We encourage you to get it done as soon as possible. Within 5 years is usually kind of the ideal situation. And that kind of that's kind of the EQIP General Fund. Like I said, anybody can apply for it. There's still funding in it, and it goes forward. Can you forward the slide, or how do I?
You should be able to.
Oh, there we go. So now we're into the so this is where they've kind of changed the funding, in that they have what they call CIS projects, or Conservation Implementation Strategy projects. And these projects are in a defined area, and the idea is that it reduces the competition. So instead of, if you're in Fall River County, instead of your application competing with applications all the way throughout the hills, your application will only compete with other applications that are within the area. So it's the goal is that it's taking the funding and it's putting it in targeted locations and making that program less competitive, so that you're more likely to get funded. And the funds are kind of set aside for 3 years within these specific project areas. And again, only the landowners within that project area can compete for those funds. So that's kind of reducing the competition. And the goal is that it aims to achieve more of a landscape level result. So if we're focusing funds in one area, maybe we can achieve better results across a certain landscape and essentially get more neighboring landowners to do the projects, because the more neighboring landowners that you have do the projects, the better the results are across the landscape. So, I don't know. I've had many landowners come and say, well, I'm doing all this thinning, but my neighbors aren't doing any. And so the goal of this is maybe that if we can target these funds and make it more likely for people to get funded, and we can get more neighboring landowners to do it, then we have better results across the entire landscape, instead of just the shotgun approach of a property here and a property there. And with these EQIP CIS projects, an important thing is that anybody can submit these proposals. So if you have a group of you and 5 neighbors that are interested in doing thinning, you can contact us and we can work with you to submit a CIS project proposal and possibly get funding designated to just the immediate area of you and your 5 neighbors. That is a possibility. And because, again, that's achieving that landscape result, and that's what these projects are looking to do. So anybody can submit these, and we can help you submit them. And so there is a lot of benefit to them. And with that, we have quite a few. We have some of these set up, so we'll kind of go into talking about them now. There we go. So this first one is the Hot Springs Wildfire and Forest Pest Mitigation CIS. So there's just kind of a little general map here, but as a description, it's kind of all the forested area in the immediate area around Hot Springs. That big jumble of roads there is Hot Springs, and it kind of goes east out to 79 and west out to 89 in that range, and then kind of down almost to Pine Shadows if you're in the Hot Springs area. And it kind of, there's the Minnetonka Valley in there, and so that's kind of the area it covers. And you know, I know this map's small and everything, so if you're unsure whether or not you're within it, of course, give me a call. We'll figure out real quickly if you're in the project area or not. But it's so just to kind of cover what it costs, we've got, for the next 3 years, we have about $314,000 of funding. So there's about $100,000 a year, $130,000 a year. The reimbursement rates are the same as EQIP. So that's the thing about these projects too. They work the exact same as EQIP. They're just within a denoted area. And so just to kind of go over what some of these reimbursement rates are that we've been talking about, pre-commercial thinning, if you have somebody come in and masticate or do a machine thinning on your land, it's $373 an acre. Or if you have somebody do handwork, it's $612 an acre. And if we do brush management, which is where we're clearing the pines out of meadows, pushing that tree line back to kind of the hill edges and reopening your meadows, for a heavy infestation, that's $263 an acre, and a medium infestation is $100 an acre. And the difference between those is one is 5% canopy cover, and then the other is 25% canopy cover or greater, which they determine by looking at an aerial photo and just saying, okay, 25% of the area that we've denoted is covered in trees. That's a heavy infestation. Then we also have a fuel break, which is $963 an acre, and that is those are set up in specific areas to kind of to create a slowdown zone on the property for fire, where you remove all of the fuel. They're much more labor intensive to do, and that's why the fuel break is kind of a higher reimbursement rate. And then one that's not on here that we also included in this project is woody debris management. And so if you're doing a pre-commercial thinning and you want to you pile the slash or you masticate the slash, so you chip it up, if you do anything but a lop and scatter, we can add on $100 per acre to the project reimbursement, because you're treating that slash in some other way than a lop and scatter, and there's a lot of benefits to that. And so you know, that $100 an acre is there, but it also incurs an extra cost. So that $100 an acre is to try and help out with that a little bit. And so then the next project would be the Custer County project. So that the Fall River project goes up to the Fall River County line, but then right above that, across the line, Custer County has a project as well, and that would be the blue area there on the bottom of the map. That's the Argyle area, and so that's a priority area. The way the Custer County project is set up is that there are 6 priority areas here. So if you're out in the Custer Highlands area, that's a priority area. If you're along Argyle Road somewhere, that's a priority area. And then there along 385, kind of on the immediate east and west sides of 385 is called the Bowman area. Well, the Bowman and then the Carroll Creek area, and both of those are priority zones. And then just kind of up to the northwest of Custer is the Little Italy / Micah Ridge area. And then out there in Custer County to the east of the park, kind of northeast of the park, along Ghost Canyon Road is also a priority zone. So if you're in any of those areas, you're within this county CIS. And again, we can help you to figure out where you're at with that. And this one has a little bit less funding over the next 2 years, because this one's been in the works for a year. So they've already funded some projects with this year. Over the next 2 years, there's still about $100,000 worth of funding. And so there's definitely funding available to apply if you're in any of these areas and you're interested in doing thinning. We can get you applied. And so now I think we can, oh, that did not go. We can hand it over to Krista to talk about the Northern Hills.
Okay, hi everyone. Like Matt said, my name is Krista. I am the Northern Hills Service Forester. So this is the Lawrence County CIS. I'll give you a second here. So the project area in Lawrence County is actually the entire county. And then there are 3 priority zones, which are the corridors for US Highway 385 and Nemo Road. And then the whole area in between 14A and 85. And exactly like what Matt said, the same practices will apply in here. We have the thinning, the brush management, fuel breaks, and woody residue treatment. And then over the next 3 years, I believe there will be just over $229,000 available. We can go to the next slide if that'd be helpful. Okay, and then this is the Meade County CIS project. So essentially from I-90, this whole southeast corner, the southwest corner of Meade County is included. The yellow line on that map there is the project area. And then again, we have 3 priority areas: Deerview, which is exit 44 south, Pleasant Valley, which is exit 37 south, and then Avalanche is the whole rest of the northern project area. Exactly like Lawrence County, there's about $229,000 available over the next 3 years for thinning, brush management, woody residue, and fuel breaks. Next slide. Okay, so we will now review the Conservation Commission funded grants. Perfect. Next slide, please. So this is a map of, thank you. This is a map of conservation districts found throughout western South Dakota. These conservation districts can apply for grant funds through the Conservation Commission. And then in the next slides, we'll address Black Hills conservation districts that currently have grant funds available for forestry work. And I'll turn it back over to Matt for the southern region.
Yep, so right now we have Custer Conservation District. So if you live, and these conservation districts pretty much outline, or they're the size of the county. So if you live in the county with the name, you can apply for these conservation district grants. So Custer Conservation District also has a thinning grant. We've gotten these to be all 2-year grants now. They used to be 1-year grants, but we found that was just too short of a timeline. So they are now 2-year grants. And the Custer grant aims to thin out 80 acres or fund 80 acres throughout the county. Right now we have 54 acres still available, so worth of funding. So there is funding available in this grant. These grants are a 50% cost share. So kind of the difference between them and the EQIP grants that we just talked about is that they are percentage based and not flat rate based. So what that means is that they are the percentage of what you are charged versus EQIP is a flat rate. So no matter what you're charged, that's the reimbursement you receive. So with EQIP, if you're charged $600 an acre and the reimbursement is $612 an acre, you're still getting the $612 an acre, even though you were charged less. So that's kind of a benefit to EQIP. With these, It's a 50% cost share, and the maximum reimbursement is $325 per acre. So that means a total project cost of $650. So if a contractor charges you $650, you'll be reimbursed $325. If a contractor charges you $300, charges you $600, you'll be reimbursed $300. So it's just 50% of what you're charged. But if a contractor charges you $700, you will still only be reimbursed $325. So these grants cover the same practices: pre-commercial thinnings, brush management, so getting those pines out of the meadows, and then they also, to receive that full reimbursement of $325, you have to have the slash treated in some way, so that it either needs to be piled up to be burned or chipped, in those two ways it needs to be treated, and then you can get the maximum reimbursement. The landowners are also required to maintain this project area for 10 years. So what that means, and a lot of that, what that really means is just that you don't want it to get back into the overgrown state that it was in before you did the work. So that could mean just going in and clipping out some seedlings. Most of the time, I've never seen that be a concern because pine grows so slow out here. I've never seen it really become an issue where after you do the work, there's all this work that needs to be done down the road. Just staying on top of it, maybe going out once every couple of years and snipping off a few of the seedlings that do pop up. Plenty of work, plenty done. So then we also have a grant here in Fall River County. If you're in Fall River, it also has a grant. They're all the same. Everything, the requirements, what they cover is all the same. There's 40 acres worth of funding still available down here in Fall River. Again, it's a 50% cost share. We're removing the encroaching pines and thinning out the overdense stands. Pretty much, they're all the same project. They're funded the same way. And if you're interested in one big benefit to these projects versus EQIP is that it's a lot easier of an application process. It's one page and there's 4 questions. You answer the 4 questions, you sign your name, and once you've contacted us and we come up with a prescription, we figure out how many acres you want to apply for, and we set up a map. Then we just take it into the conservation district. The board, we present it to the board. They decide whether or not they want to approve that, and then they do approve it. These are typically first come, first serve. So, if you apply and we take it into the board, they vote on it there, and then you're approved. So it's a much faster process. With the EQIP program, there can be, after you apply, there can be like 6 months to a year worth of waiting until you find out whether or not you're approved, and then when you can start. With this, you're approved. Okay, you can begin finding a contractor and you can begin work. So this is just a simpler, faster process. It does have a lower reimbursement rate, but if you're looking to get started right away, if you don't want to deal with all the application process, this is a pretty good option for that. And these are, at least in Custer and Fall River County, these are also limited to 20 acres per landowner per application, just because they want to make sure that they can spread that funding out between as many landowners as possible. And go back to Krista.
Okay, so the Lawrence Conservation District also has a thinning grant for the same practices that Matt said. We had a target of 100 acres and we have just over 40 still available. Next slide, please. We also have the Pennington Conservation District, which has some grant funds available. We have about 10 acres still left for folks to apply for. And Meade County folks are also eligible to apply for this. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact Matt or I about the Conservation District bidding grants or the NRCS programs. Matt and I can both put our contact info in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you both. That's great. So I'm going to cover Wildland Fire was not able to be with us today. So I'm going to cover their topics. Wildland Fire does have a hazardous fuels reduction program. In Lawrence, Pennington, Fall River, and Custer County, it's 80% cost share to certain areas and 50% cost share in Meade County. For more information on that information, Logan Brown with the Wildland Urban Interface would be the one to talk to. And his information is right there. So we were talking a little bit earlier about getting a forest stewardship plan. One of the ways that you can do that is either through the South Dakota DANR Forest Stewardship Program development grant, or the South Dakota Family Forest Association Forest Development Grant.
My rocket.
Sorry about that. So with the South Dakota Family Forest Association Forest Stewardship Plan Development Grant, it is a cost share payments to landowners for the preparation of a forest stewardship plan. The forest stewardship plans, the purpose of this is to allow private consulting foresters to do the forest stewardship plans, because sometimes the state's foresters are not available. And if you have like time commitments that you want, we are very into a lot of these other grants, so it is one way to do it. So the minimum acreage to receive the cost share through this program is 40 forested acres. So having 40 acres but only a giant meadow in the middle doesn't count. It has to be 40 forested acres. The cost share rate is $1,000 for the first 40 acres, with a per acre for each additional acre above 40 of $5 an acre. But it is not to exceed 75% of the plan preparation costs. This program has a cap of $2,500 per plan. Each person that chooses to participate in this program must become a paying South Dakota Family Forest Association member and will be visited by a forester who is an inspector once every 5 years. For more information on that, there is the website down there, and I can share it if someone would like to know.